James Jim Caldwell, age 65, sat unmoving in his wheelchair, stationed near the center of Riverfront Plaza where the Memorial Day ceremony had begun. The sun had settled into its soft noonlight, falling across the worn shoulders of his silver Marine Corps jacket. The fabric, threadbare at the elbows, bore creases like scars. On his chest gleamed a single campaign ribbon, Grenada, 1983. His hands, mottled and stiff with age, rested quietly on the rims of his wheels. Children tugged at parents' sleeves. A Boy Scout raised a plastic flag. Nearby, a speaker tapped the microphone twice, prepping for the annual roll call of the fallen. The bugler, a high school senior in a pressed uniform, took position. Then came the shove. A man in a tailored blue suit, shoes sharp as razors, strode quickly through the crowd, cutting between families and folding chairs. The kind of man who made space not by kindness but by command. He didn't glance at the names engraved in granite or the older veterans seated quietly near the front. He moved like time owed him something. He reached Jim. "You're blocking the view," the man snapped, his voice low but biting. "This isn't your show." Jim looked up slowly. The man's shadow fell across him, his tie fluttering slightly in the breeze. The crowd around them was still. "Step aside," the man said again, quieter, but sharper. "Some of us came here to actually honor the dead." For a moment, nothing moved. The bugler stood frozen, horn at his lips. A mother turned her child's head away. Jim blinked. Not fast. Not in protest. Just once, slow, deliberate. He didn't reply. A breeze carried the sound of flags snapping overhead. Somewhere behind them, a toddler whispered, "Is he a soldier?" And a woman murmured back, "He was." Jim lowered his eyes. The insult didn't need repeating. It had landed. But no one told the man to move. No one came forward. Not yet. Before the wheelchair. Before the insult in the plaza. Before Riverfront had a flag for every name, James Caldwell was simply Jim, a lanky farm kid from Athens County, Ohio. 17 when he enlisted. Barely a man. A runner, known for mile splits that made local track coaches shake their heads in disbelief. He had no grand plan. No speeches or promises. He wanted to leave town, see something wider than rows of soybeans and weather-worn barns. And the Marine Corps, with its quiet, hard certainty, offered him that. Boot camp in Paris Island stripped the softness fast. Jim remembered the way his palms turned raw after 3 days. The silent dread before inspections. The whisper-quick discipline in every step. But more than anything, he remembered the running, before dawn, after chow, across sand that burned at noon and chilled like bone at night. He ran until breath left him and came back sharpened. He ran until his thoughts stilled. They shipped him to Grenada in October of 1983. Operation Urgent Fury. No headlines. No debates. Just orders. He was 23. First time off the continent. First time carrying live rounds on a real deployment. They landed just past midnight. Rain fell sideways. Jim and his unit huddled beneath a crooked stand of palms, their boots sunk ankle-deep in mud. His orders, night recon. Move fast, keep quiet, gather intel. He remembered his squad leader saying it 3 times, don't engage unless engaged. Eyes open. Move as ghosts. But the jungle never played fair. Halfway through their route, gunfire erupted to the east. Not their patrol. Another squad, Bravo Team, had been ambushed near the communication tower. Radios cracked static. Orders blurred. Jim heard the call for assistance. His corporal looked at him and muttered, "Too far. Too risky." But Jim didn't wait. He took off through the underbrush alone, heart hammering, boots sliding over roots slick with rain. He moved without thought, a map of instinct unfolding in his chest. Gunfire stitched the canopy above. Someone screamed. He found them in a ravine, 3 Marines pinned behind broken concrete, one slumped motionless, another clutching a shredded thigh. He remembered the youngest, barely out of boot camp, trying to reload with trembling hands. Jim never stopped running. He sprinted straight into fire, dropped smoke, and hauled the wounded one over his shoulder. Twice more he went back. When it was done, Bravo was alive. He didn't remember the shrapnel. Just a pressure in his lower back, like someone driving a nail between his spine. The pain came later. The wheelchair, even later still. Evac happened at dawn. Jim awoke inside a C-130, a morphine haze blurring the jungle into ceiling lights. A nurse was wiping blood from his boots. She whispered something about how he was damn lucky, but Jim only stared at the ceiling. Silent. The citation came in weeks later. Navy and Marine Corps Medal. Heroism not involving conflict with the enemy, they called it. He didn't hang it. Didn't even open the envelope until months after rehab began. 3 vertebrae shattered. Nerve damage. Partial paralysis. The word permanent etched into his records. What followed was a long corridor of white walls, hollow questions, and the quiet erosion of a life that once moved fast. They taught him how to wheel. How to relearn stairs through patience. How to dress, shave, lift, things he'd never noticed before. Letters came from home. His brother wrote about crop yields. His mother said she still made his favorite pie in case he came back for Sunday dinner. No one said much about the war. That was fine. He didn't like talking about it either. Years passed. He took a civil job in postal services, clerking, sorting. He showed up early, always. Delivered with precision. Became part of a rhythm that no longer required running. He volunteered evenings at the local library. GED tutoring. Filing forms for veterans who couldn't read the VA paperwork. He grew to know every broken step in the town sidewalks, every poorly built ramp, every place where accessibility was still a polite myth. People respected him, quietly. He didn't demand it. He rarely told anyone about Grenada. The Marine jacket, silver, patched, and softened by time, was the only visible part of that chapter. And even it stayed in the closet most of the year. Only on Memorial Day would he bring it out, press it carefully, and pin on that ribbon. It wasn't pride. It was memory. A way to say, I was there. I came back. I didn't forget. And so, on this particular Memorial Day morning, when Jim wheeled himself into the plaza before sunrise, it wasn't for pageantry. It was duty. Personal. Silent. A continuation of something that hadn't ended just because his legs stopped moving. The band began warming up. The crowd gathered. And then came the man in the suit. The insult. The words that cut deeper than any shell fragment. Not because they were cruel, but because they were casual. Dismissive. As though everything before this, service, sacrifice, survival, could be swept aside by a view and a voice loud enough to drown history. Jim didn't respond. He never did. But something shifted in the air that day. And somewhere not far behind him, someone had noticed. In the hours that followed, the ceremony played on as planned. Speeches, roll calls, the reading of names. But Jim sat still, half present, half absent. The sting of that voice, "This isn't your show," lingered like smoke. Not because it was the first. It was only the latest. He remembered the stairs in the grocery aisle when he couldn't reach the top shelf and had to ask. The pity glance from a teenager who whispered to her friend and handed him the wrong cereal without even waiting for thanks. The clumsy way job interviews ended, quiet smiles, folded hands, and a final, "we'll be in touch," that never materialized. Not cruelty. Just invisibility. He recalled the night the bus driver muttered, "Just get a ramp," as if Jim's body were an inconvenience. No one protested. No one looked up. A mechanical sigh of hydraulics, then silence. He sat alone in the dim interior, wheels locked, staring at his own reflection in the smeared window. The town had seen him, often, even warmly. But never fully. Never as someone still becoming. After the ceremony, people packed up folding chairs. Children chased each other past the war memorial. Teenagers checked their phones. Somewhere nearby, a local radio host interviewed a councilman about veterans' needs and community resilience. Jim didn't listen. The man in the suit was gone, vanished into the crowd like all moments of disrespect, sharp, sudden, but fleeting for those who could walk away. For Jim, it stayed. He wheeled himself back toward his van, old, dented, side ramp jammed at times. It was parked 3 blocks away. Every bump in the pavement jarred his spine, but he'd learned not to show discomfort. Years of managing pain had taught him a new kind of endurance, quiet, unglorified. Along the sidewalk, a couple stepped aside to let him pass. Their smiles were kind, but quick. Like people brushing past an exhibit they'd already seen. The veteran in the wheelchair. Yes, we've honored that one. On to the next. He passed the library where he tutored on Thursdays. A boy named Mateo had just earned his GED. Jim had stayed late 3 nights that month to help him master fractions and irregular verbs. No headlines. No ceremony. Just a handshake outside the library door and the quiet knowledge that another life had tilted toward hope. Earlier that year, he'd helped Maria, a retired nurse, navigate her VA benefits. She'd wept when the paperwork finally cleared, saying no one else had taken the time to explain it. Jim never told anyone. He didn't need to. But today's insult cut deeper because it happened in the open. Because it happened where people were meant to remember, not forget. Because no one stood up. No one said, "That's James Caldwell. He saved men in a jungle most of us can't even find on a map. He carried them when others fell. And he came home to live quietly among us, to keep serving even when no one was watching." Instead, they watched him be told he was in the way. He reached his van and sat there a moment before loading in. His hands trembled slightly. Age? Fatigue? No, something colder. Not anger. Not even hurt. Just the ache of being passed over. When he finally returned home, a narrow duplex tucked behind an auto shop, he placed the marine jacket back on its hanger. He smoothed it once, gently, like laying a flag over a casket. He didn't speak. In the kitchen, the answering machine blinked once. A message from the city's Veterans Liaison Office. "Mr. Caldwell, we received your form requesting assistance with the lift repair. Unfortunately, funding for adaptive equipment reimbursements has been reallocated. We'll follow up if future grants become available." Jim sat at the table. Listened twice. Then erased it. It was not new. He poured a cup of instant coffee. Black. No sugar. Steam curled into the air. Outside, sirens passed on Main Street. Children's laughter rose faintly from a park down the block. He stared at the chipped ceramic mug and felt something unexpected. Not bitterness. Not even exhaustion. But dislocation. Like a man unmoored. He'd lived here over 2 decades. He'd helped neighbors shovel snow in winter. Volunteered at storm shelters. Donated blood. Filed taxes early. Served jury duty. Taught 3 boys to read who later became teachers themselves. But today, a single man's voice had undone all of that. Not in truth. But in perception. And perception, he had learned, was often louder than facts. His phone buzzed. A text from the mayor's office, mass sent, impersonal. Today, we honor the brave men and women who've kept this nation safe. Thank you for your service. #Memorial Day #gratitude. He didn't reply. Instead, he opened his wallet. Tucked behind his VA card was an old photo, creased and faded. His squad. 8 men. All younger than they had any right to be. 2 had died that night in Grenada. 3 others wounded. He hadn't seen the surviving 4 in years. But their names still echoed. He remembered what one had said after Jim dragged him from the firefight. "You ran like death couldn't catch you." Jim never answered then. He only ran because someone had to. And he still showed up now because someone still had to. Even when the crowd leaned away. Even when the man in the suit sneered. Even when the ramp cracked, or the paperwork failed, or the nod of acknowledgement never came. Service, he had come to understand, wasn't a thing you did. It was a thing you lived. And even now, even bruised and forgotten, he lived it. That afternoon, the sky shifted. Rain moved in quiet sheets across the town. Jim sat by the window, watching the flag outside his building ripple against the wind. His reflection blurred in the glass. Outside, the plaza emptied. Memorial wreaths bowed under water. And in a town that had once asked him to fight, the silence pressed closer. But something, somewhere, had shifted. Because silence, when broken rightly, could echo. And someone, one witness, one voice, was already moving to break it. Officer Elena Morales had arrived early to the Memorial Day ceremony, as she always did. She wasn't on duty, not officially. The department had plenty of uniformed officers already posted along Riverfront Plaza. She stood at the far edge of the crowd, just behind the bandstand where the river breeze carried scents of pine mulch and fresh lawn. Her badge was tucked into her purse. She wore civilian clothes, slacks, a navy blouse, and a bronze Marine Corps pin on her collar, worn small, for herself. Not for others. She came to these ceremonies not for speeches or parades, but for the roll call of names. She always listened. Even when the crowd rustled or children grew restless. She stood still. She read every face in the audience, every movement. So when the suited man pushed forward and barked at the man in the wheelchair, Elena saw it. She saw how his voice sliced through the air like a weapon dressed in etiquette. She saw how the crowd didn't quite react, how they paused, glanced, then quickly returned to their programs and phones. She saw how Jim didn't respond, only blinked. She didn't move then. Not immediately. Instead, her training returned, Marine Reserves, 8 years. She had learned to assess first. Hold back. Observe. Her eyes scanned the man in the suit. Polished shoes. Custom tailoring. The kind of confidence people mistake for credibility. She watched how he brushed past the old veteran as if stepping around debris. She looked at the veteran. The way his hands stayed folded in his lap. Not from fear. But discipline. That stillness she remembered from officers who had seen more than they ever spoke of. Then she noticed something else. No one stepped forward. Not a single person. Not the city official near the stage. Not the ushers. Not even the junior ROTC student posted at the side of the memorial arch. The silence wasn't just awkward, it was complicit. Elena clenched her hands. Not in anger. In recognition. She had worn the uniform, too. And she had stood in the background of too many ceremonies watching civilians nod solemnly and walk away unchanged. She knew the veteran in the wheelchair wasn't just enduring insult. He was embodying something harder, dignity without defense. She took a breath. Then moved. Not fast. Not dramatic. She stepped through the edge of the crowd, quietly weaving between folding chairs. A few heads turned, unsure if she was an organizer or latecomer. She didn't correct them. She moved with purpose but no announcement. She approached from behind, stopping just to Jim's right, keeping a respectful distance. Her shadow joined his. She didn't speak. Jim turned his head slightly, sensing her presence. Their eyes met briefly. No words. Just a shared understanding. She nodded once. That was all. Elena didn't confront the man in the suit. He was already gone, the damage done. And confrontation wasn't the point. Presence was. She stood there throughout the rest of the ceremony. While names were read. While the bugle sang taps into the wind. While the mayor offered words about sacrifice and citizenship. She didn't need to speak to make her purpose known. She had stood guard before, in deserts, in forgotten checkpoints, beside men who thought she wasn't strong enough until she carried more than they could. She had worn flak and fatigue and body armor. Today, she wore silence. And it fit like armor. As the ceremony ended, the crowd shifted again. Programs folded. Children lifted onto shoulders. Folding chairs scraped the brick plaza. But some people noticed now. A few veterans near the front looked toward Jim, and saw Elena. One of them, an older man with a VFW cap and trembling hands, rose slowly and saluted Jim across the aisle. Elena didn't react. But she saw it. Small movements. Small beginnings. Later, near the fountain, the mayor approached Jim to offer a brief apology. "Sorry about the disruption earlier," she said vaguely. "We'll look into it." Jim didn't reply. Elena did. Her voice calm, precise. "His name is James Caldwell. He was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal. He pulled 3 men out of a ravine in Grenada. And he's been serving this community every day since he came home." The mayor blinked. Then nodded slowly. "Thank you, officer." "Just Elena," she said. Jim's eyes met hers again. Still nothing spoken. But she saw it, behind the quiet, a nod of respect, and maybe something more. A kind of relief. Not gratitude. Recognition. They were cut from similar cloth. Worn different ranks. Different wars. Same country. Same quiet code. Later that afternoon, as the plaza emptied, Elena stayed behind. She walked once more through the space, pausing at the benches. At the engraved names. At the flag, still catching the breeze. She knelt briefly beside a marker bearing the name of a fellow Marine, Lance Corporal Reyes. "Kia, 2006. She whispered, still watching out, "Buddy." Then stood. She left no note. Took no photo. Her presence wasn't performance. It was a continuation. Because not all guards carry rifles. Some carry memory. Some carry silence. And some, when the moment comes, step forward not to fight, but to witness. To say, in a world of passing shadows, "I see you still." Word spread quietly. Not through headlines or official statements, but through those who had quietly watched and remembered. Craig Leland heard about it secondhand, hours after the ceremony. He owned the corner coffee shop, the one with cracked tiles and hand-painted mugs. He'd seen Jim in there many times, always early, always polite, always helping kids with their homework or old men with their VA letters. The tutoring sessions weren't formal. They just happened, like rainfall, steady and unnoticed until the ground had changed. Craig's own son, Tyler, once a failing senior, now enrolled in state college, had Jim to thank. The boy wouldn't talk about it, just said, "Mr. Caldwell showed me how not to quit." Craig never forgot that. When he heard what happened, he closed shop early. Teenagers from the community center, kids Jim had helped study for their GEDs or fill out job applications, began texting each other. "Did you see what that man did to Mr. Caldwell? At the ceremony? Unbelievable." They began to gather. Not to protest, but to show up. By sundown, a loose semicircle of people formed around Jim's modest duplex. Some came with nothing but their presence. Others brought small tokens, a flower, a cup of coffee, a card that simply said, "Thanks." No speeches. No slogans. Just people. People who remembered. Veterans, too, began to arrive. Caps in hand, eyes heavy with shared knowledge. None had stood at the plaza when the insult landed. But guilt makes its way slowly through old bones. They stood now. And then the mayor came. Mayor Ellen Brooks had served 2 terms without scandal, always shaking hands, always moving. But that afternoon, when she'd heard Elena's words, "His name is James Caldwell," something in her paused. She ordered a halt to the flag lowering at City Hall and changed her schedule. When she arrived outside Jim's home, she didn't come with a camera crew. Just her chief of staff and an old city file. She stepped through the crowd, parting like tide around her, and stopped in front of Jim's door. He was already outside, seated in his wheelchair on the porch, hands folded in his lap. Quiet. Still. Mayor Brooks crouched so she could look him in the eye. "I've read your file," she said softly. "The official one. And the real one." Jim didn't answer. She glanced at the crowd. "Today, we gathered to honor those who served," she said, voice steady, "but we failed to recognize someone who never stopped." She stood. "To the people of this town," she continued, now addressing the street, "James Caldwell is not a memory. He's part of our present. A man who gave, and still gives." From her staff, she took a small velvet box. Opened it. It held a pin, gold-plated, small, a city seal surrounded by the words, "Service above self." "Mr. Caldwell," she said, turning back to him, "we'd like to present this to you, not for what you did in uniform, though that matters, but for what you've done since." Quietly. Without reward. She hesitated. Then added, "And I'd like to offer a formal apology. On behalf of the city. For how you were treated. And for all the times we didn't see you." Still, Jim didn't speak. But he looked at her, and nodded once. That was enough. The mayor placed the box in his lap and stepped back. Silence held. Then Craig stepped forward. "Not as a business owner. As a father. My son wouldn't be in college without this man." A teenager followed. Her voice uncertain, trembling. "He helped me get my driver's license. Sat with me at the DMV when no one else could." One by one, others came. A janitor who'd learned English with Jim's help. A single mother whose son Jim had tutored every Thursday night for 3 years. A veteran who said Jim helped him face the memories. The circle grew tighter, not in confrontation, but in acknowledgement. The folding chairs from the ceremony, left scattered across Riverfront Plaza, had been quietly gathered by neighbors. Someone set them up across Jim's lawn. A table appeared. A pitcher of lemonade. An old speaker playing soft gospel from the 60s. By evening, the gathering resembled something between a wake and a celebration. The kind reserved for people too humble to expect it. And then, unexpectedly, the bugler arrived. The same high school senior from the plaza, still in uniform, cheeks flushed. He approached nervously, carrying his instrument in a soft black case. "I didn't get it right earlier," he told Jim. "I choked when that man yelled at you. I saw it. I didn't do anything. I'm sorry." Jim studied him. Then spoke, his first words since the insult. "You played fine," he said. His voice was quiet but firm. Don't apologize for being young. Just don't stay silent when you've grown. The bugler nodded. Then, slowly, he stepped to the edge of the porch. He raised his trumpet. And played taps again. This time, no interruptions. No passing cars. No distractions. Just a single note, held gently in the evening air, heard by those who chose to listen. When the last note faded, the crowd stood still. Not clapping. Not cheering. Just silence. Elena Morales, who had arrived late and stood near the back, felt something shift in her chest. A return. A restoration. Mayor Brooks stepped back to the microphone someone had set up near the sidewalk. She spoke just one more sentence. Today, we see in our midst one who served without fanfare, who still carries that duty in everyday acts. No more was needed. Recognition didn't have to be loud. It just had to be real. The next morning broke slowly. A soft gray light filtered over Riverfront Plaza, still damp from the night's dew. Birds picked at breadcrumbs scattered across the grass. A breeze stirred the flags, now standing motionless after yesterday's storm of presents. Jim Caldwell sat at his window, eyes tracing the edges of the morning. No sound in the house except the gentle hum of the old radiator. The marine jacket hung again by the door. But something had changed. Not in the jacket. In the way the town now looked back. A letter arrived at 8:12 a.m., hand-delivered by a city clerk who stood stiffly on the porch, clearly unused to such assignments. She offered a tight smile, handed over the envelope, and left without words. Inside was a typed invitation. Official seal. The city council had voted unanimously. Mr. James Caldwell is to be honored in a post-service commemorative ceremony, June 5th, at Riverfront Park. A public dedication will follow. No details. But enough. Jim held the letter without reaction. He didn't need ceremony. But he understood symbolism. Later that afternoon, the preparations began. Landscapers arrived at Riverfront Park with caution tape and folding signs. The bench, old, splintering, was removed. A patch of ground cleared beneath the willow tree near the war memorial. The city installed temporary boards to redirect foot traffic. Teenagers gathered at a distance, whispering. Some asked questions. Others just watched. By Thursday, a stone base appeared, quietly, under a tarp. Workers left it untouched until Saturday morning. That was when the town gathered again. Not for protest. Not for apology. But for something older than both, remembrance. Chairs were set in rows. Flags planted along the perimeter. A podium placed in front of the willow's outstretched limbs. Craig from the coffee shop handed out programs. Elena stood off to the side, in full uniform this time. The teenagers Jim had once tutored flanked the front row, back straight, eyes alert. The mayor adjusted the mic. Then waited. At 11 a.m., Jim arrived. No fanfare. Just the creak of his wheels over the bricks. He came alone. Parked at the edge of the crowd. People turned. But didn't rush. Instead, they stood, one by one, until every person was on their feet. Not for spectacle. For respect. The mayor stepped to the mic. Today we dedicate this bench in honor of a man who reminds us that service does not end at discharge. That heroism doesn't always carry a rifle. That dignity, quietly held, changes everything. She gestured to the tarp behind her. 2 volunteers stepped forward. The cloth was lifted. The bench was simple. Carved from dark granite. Smooth. No ornamentation. On its surface, etched with care, were the words. In honor of James, Jim, Caldwell. Marine. Mentor. Neighbor. Friend. Service is not measured in medals, but in the lives we carry forward. No one clapped. But the silence deepened. Jim wheeled forward slowly. Reached the bench. Touched the stone. He didn't sit. He just rested his hand there. And nodded once. The bugler from the ceremony, now dressed in full band attire, stepped forward again. This time, he played not taps, but America the Beautiful. Not because Jim had requested it, but because the town had. After the music faded, Craig took the mic, spoke briefly. He helped my son. Then the librarian. He made the children feel smart. Then Elena. I saw a man refuse dignity. And I saw a town decide not to look away. Then, quietly, one of the teenagers stepped forward. She was maybe 17. Wore an oversized hoodie and scuffed sneakers. Her voice shook. I failed junior year. Everyone said I'd never catch up. Mr. Caldwell met me every Saturday. Never once asked for anything. Just said, we'll get there. I graduate this month. And I got into nursing school. She looked at Jim. Thank you, she said. For helping me believe I still had a future. Her words cracked slightly on the last syllable. Jim met her eyes. Nodded. Still silent. Still holding space. The ceremony ended without a grand finale. Just folding chairs being stacked. Children being lifted into arms. The mayor shaking hands. The crowd thinning. But something stayed. People lingered. Took photos of the bench. Ran fingers over the etched letters. By afternoon, a local journalist posted the story online. It gained quiet traction. Not viral. Not loud. Just shared. Titled, A Town Sees Its Hero, at Last. By evening, the bench had candles around it. Not placed by city staff. Placed by people. Jim returned home just before dusk. The letter still on the kitchen table. The jacket still by the door. He sat by the window. Watched as two children paused at the new bench, placed a hand-drawn card, then ran back to their parents. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. But in his chest, something released. Not pride. Not vindication. Just breath. The kind that tells you, something held too long has finally been seen. We see you now.